Good morning. My name is Brian Mink. I am the Legal Operations Director at Norfolk Southern Corporation in Atlanta, where we leverage data in a variety of capacities for our law department. And I'm also an adjunct professor of legal analytics and innovation at the University of Georgia School of Law. Today, I'm going to be talking about bite-sized data science, building your data science business case and workflow one step at a time. And I really come at this from the perspective of an attorney and a business person who leverages data, a data scientist. So I help organizations that I'm a part of set themselves up to be in a position to leverage data in a way that utilizes substantial subject matter expertise and generates value for the business. So I'll talk for a second about my journey to data science. I started at a couple of large law firms in Atlanta and recently have moved over to Norfolk Southern, which is a Fortune 300 company, one of the largest railroad companies in North America. And, you know, at a large law firm, and I really came at this from the perspective of somebody who wasn't necessarily looking to use data initially, hadn't really thought about, you know, being a data scientist or a data strategist. Like a lot of folks who are in this space, I really was just trying to solve my own problem. I saw some inefficiencies in my law practice, drafting contracts. I did a lot of large commercial transactions. And so I tried to resolve those efficiencies by developing automated expert systems, and then found myself coming back again and again to data and having to learn about data and how to effectively leverage it. And that's brought me to where I am today in legal operations, leveraging data at a large law department of Fortune 300 company. So data maturity at large law firms, where I started, really shapes the way that I view how you implement data strategies within an organization. Because if you're familiar with large law firms, you may know that data science is almost non-existent in the large law firm landscape. There are no data science teams really at any large law firms. There are a handful of law firms in the world that even have one data scientist on staff, let alone a team of data scientists. There's a handful that maybe partner with universities to do various projects, or may hire freelance data scientists or analysts here and there, but you really don't have any sort of data science infrastructure at large law firms to speak of. That's for a few reasons, but one of those big reasons is that a lot of the data that you're dealing with at a large law firm is unstructured text data. And specifically, the things that I was working on, it was very lengthy contracts, Word documents, and PDFs that are, by their nature, unstructured data that you got to do things with them in order to leverage it. It's not easy to take that data and be able to leverage it in a significant way. So that is one of the barriers that I had to overcome, was figuring out how we're going to get that unstructured text data into a format where we can effectively leverage it. And the other thing that I'll touch on is that we had expensive subject matter experts. So large law firms, you typically bill by the hour. Attorneys are billing by the hour. In order to effectively leverage data in this context, you need subject matter experts. You need to partner with attorneys who understand the legal side, but also have an appreciation for the data and are willing to learn the data. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time for any attorney to work with a data scientist or to work with software that leverages machine learning to be able to make that attractive from a business standpoint, to be able to make it work and to add value to various use cases. Takes a lot of attorney time. And that is time that otherwise could be billed to clients at hundreds or even thousands of dollars an hour. So it makes it very difficult at a large law firm to justify the expense of investing in extensive data science or machine learning applications when you're going to be blowing through tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars very quickly if you partner with any subject matter expert in the business. So this really leads me to a more transferable theme that cuts across my experience in the corporate environment, and also that I think will be relatable to a lot of you at no matter what organization you're at, is that many times the technology is not the barrier. The thing that keeps organizations from leveraging data is not that they don't have the technology that they need or couldn't get it at a cost-effective level. It's really these other factors. It's that the organizations they're a part of don't have a coherent data strategy. They don't have a plan for implementing data-driven technologies and approaches in their business. They lack the talent to be able to develop that plan and to implement the plan once they have it. They have poor data, and data is siloed in different places throughout the organization. There's not a single source of truth. And then the thing that I ran into at a law firm, and I think if you're not at a tech company or a company that utilizes technology in its primary business, you probably run into this, and that is that it's just not a priority. Any type of major data-driven initiative takes substantial resources, it takes substantial time, and in a law firm context, the IT folks, the people who have the subject matter expertise to be able to do some of this, are focused on mission critical projects like keeping the computers from getting hacked, making sure that we have information governance in place, and they're not really thinking about how to leverage the data to generate value because they just don't have the time to do that. And so when you come with an idea to these folks, they would love to be part of your innovative, interesting idea, but they've got 10 other projects that are ahead of you on the list, and they're just not going to get to you unless you make a persuasive business case. So that's going to be a major focus of this talk today, is how do you make that persuasive business case? If you've got an idea or you're trying to do something with your team to add substantial value to your business, how do you put together a business case that is going to convince even skeptical and non-data savvy executives of what you're trying to do and to implement your data-driven strategies? All right, so this is what I call the 3 Bs, and that is barriers to innovation. You can run into these at any organization of any size, but I find that these are the biggest barriers to any type of innovation or data science project, and that is budget, bureaucracy, and backbone. So a lot of times you'll raise a great idea, and what do you hear? Oh, sorry, that's not in the budget for this year, maybe next year. Or, well, we've got to get approval from my boss's boss and my boss's boss's boss, and it's just, we don't want to burn our political capital on that this year. Let's try it again later, or we don't think that's going to move forward. Sounds like a great idea, but I'm not ready to take a risk on it. And that leads me to this third point, which is backbone. Anytime you're implementing any type of significant innovation in an organization, anytime you're bringing data science into an organization that is data immature, that is not experienced in leveraging data to drive decision making, it requires backbone. Whether it's you or somebody in your organization, it requires somebody in the organization saying, we are going to make this a priority. We believe in the business case for this, and we're going to find the place in the budget. We're going to get the approvals we need to make this happen, to generate value for our company. All right. So one way you can be persuasive against these obstacles is through aggregation of marginal gains. So you may have heard about the British cycling team. Dave Brailsford was a new coach of the British cycling team. I believe it was in the mid 2000s. They were a terrible team for years and years. Hadn't won a Tour de France, I think, since 1908, or maybe had won one. And he really turned this team around. They ended up winning 5 out of 6 Tour de France's. They dominated 2 different Olympics following his coaching, and he relied on this strategy that he developed, aggregation of marginal gains, which is, instead of saying we're just going to get a lot better, suddenly we're just going to get a lot better, we're going to have this transformational change. Instead, you think about ways to break that down and to aggregate those marginal gains. So he said, if we can get better across the board, 1% better across the board in every single metric, then the aggregation of those marginal gains is going to have a significant impact. Even little things like they were testing out the different pillows that they used so they could get better quality sleep. They were sleeping on different beds. Little things that by themselves don't make any impact, when you aggregate them, make a significant impact. And so I think that's one way you can approach any of your data science projects. You might have a grand vision for what you want to do, but ultimately, if you want to get there, aggregation of marginal gains is the best thing to do. Take it one bite at a time and try to build that up to something ultimately that's going to be incredibly valuable. All right, so these are the 3 keys to implementing innovation, and I'll walk through each of these. First of all, start with utility, then get quick wins and immediate ROI, and then make sure that everything that you build is a building block to the next innovation that you want to implement. So let's start with the first one, and that's start with utility. So I saw a Stanford eCorner podcast from Mark Zuckerberg in October 2005, and this is when Facebook was just starting to become a large company. It was not yet a household name, let alone, to the extent that it is today, one of the most valuable companies in the world. But this is one of the things that Mark Zuckerberg said, what inspired Facebook. He said, during my sophomore year, I decided Harvard needed a Facebook because it didn't have one. And so I made it. And it's basically just a utility for people to figure out what's going on in their lives and in their friends' lives. Now, think about the way he describes Facebook there versus the way that we might describe Facebook today. I mean, today we think about, wow, all the advertising data that Facebook is collecting, that Facebook has been a tool that has been used to manipulate elections. I mean, it is an incredibly powerful tool. They're collecting a tremendous amount of data, but he's not talking about any of that there. What he's talking about is the utility, what makes it valuable to the user to want to give Facebook their data. And that's something to keep in mind when you're finding your utility, when you're in your organization and you're thinking, I really want to collect this data from my stakeholders. We are not currently collecting this data. How do I get them to give me their data without adding steps to the workflow and making people irritated that now they have to put something in a portal that they didn't have to do before? They have to enter something in a database that previously they were just typing into a Word document that was very convenient, right? How do I do that? How do I now incentivize them to give me their data? And I would say start with their pain point. Start with the pain point of your stakeholders. Okay, they're doing this thing in a manual way. So maybe we can automate that process. And by the way, as a byproduct of that automation, they're going to be giving me their structured data. And now we're collecting the data that we need for other applications that we as the data science team want. And I'd also say in that process, it's important to future-proof your solution. So if you're going to be collecting data now, structured data that you weren't collecting before, make sure that it's clean, that it's the data that you want to collect. Think through your long-term applications so that you don't find yourself having to clean up the data that you have been collecting when you could have done it correctly the first time. So this is what I did when I was at a large law firm, trying to take this apart bit by bit, one bite at a time. Is I first started with checklists to outline processes. Attorneys love checklists. They're scared of technology, but they love checklists. So I played to my audience, developed a checklist. And the great thing about a checklist, you can see it's a table. It looks a lot like a spreadsheet, a database. So this is the start of your structured data. And it also allows you to disaggregate the workflow. So this is basically Lean Six Sigma. I'm Lean Six Sigma certified. This is basically Lean Six Sigma. You break down everything in your entire process, and then you figure out the lowest labor rate that you can push it down to. All right. So this started in heavy manufacturing. This is basically the assembly line, but you can bring that into what's called the industrialization of cognition. You can bring that into professions that specialize in knowledge, like law. And that allows you to drive down costs. And at a law firm, we often have arrangements with clients that are fixed or alternative fee arrangements. So that incentivizes the law firm to meet a fixed fee, basically. So if the law firm is more efficient, the law firm generates the savings. So that was the business case that I made is, look, if we push this down, if we make it more efficient, we are going to make that money because we are under a fixed fee with our client. We get paid the same regardless of how much time it takes us to do it. So the significance of automation, as I mentioned, is that it pushes the steps in that process down to software. So if something was previously performed by a human, now you're systematically pushing it down to cheaper and cheaper labor rates and ultimately down to software through automation. Automation then creates that structured digital record that you need in order to start leveraging your data. And that's what contracts are. They're unstructured data. So this allows, when you're drafting a contract, if you automate the process of drafting a contract, you now have the ability to capture structured data as opposed to unstructured data that you can then leverage for a variety of use cases. All right, so this is exhaust data. You may hear it called this, which is it's the byproduct of our digital activities. When I draft a contract, that's a byproduct of a digital activity. It's now a Word document or a PDF that is a liability. It's the company has got to keep track of what's in that contract. But if I can produce instead structured exhaust data in a database that we can leverage, that now is an asset. Now we can take that information, we can use it to strategize, we can leverage the data, and it's not just sitting somewhere in a Word document that we've got to go read. And we may have thousands or millions of Word documents with contracts. Instead, it's in a database and we can start to leverage that data. All right, so this leads to the second point, quick wins. We've got to hurry up, I'm running out of time here, but make sure that projects quickly pay for themselves. And that's the benefit of doing this bite-sized approach, is that it's a lot easier to justify each step in the process and for your smaller projects to quickly pay for themselves. So as part of that, you got to preserve workflow integrity. If you say, I'm going to totally reinvent the process, people aren't going to go for that. They're not going to say, well, I was doing it this way for 20 years, and now we've got to suddenly do it differently because the data science team says we do. It's not going to fly, especially with highly paid subject matter experts like attorneys who think highly of themselves, right? So you need to provide workflow integrity. So that's what I did with this automation, is basically the attorney just gets the output they would have gotten before from a junior attorney. The senior attorney still get what's called a red line. They still get this draft versus the form. They still get to see all the changes that were made. It's just that the changes were made by automation rather than by an expensive attorney. And this is the reason why that's important, is you look at these types of machine learning, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, and all of these require, if you're doing it in a specialized profession like law, like medicine, they require a human to provide feedback in order to train your model. And so that gets very expensive very quickly when your human is an expensive subject matter expert billing by the hour. So this is the way that I pitched it, and you can pitch things depending on how your business makes money, but you should think about, how does my business make money? What savings can we achieve through automation? What savings or what additional revenue can we generate through scalable revenue models, right? Because now we have software performing tasks that previously humans were performing. The software is much more scalable than a human is. And so you may have seen this hierarchy of data analytics, descriptive analytics, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. And yes, data scientists get very excited about predictive and prescriptive because the technology that's out there, but you can drive a lot of value to your business simply by implementing descriptive analytics, by just saying what happened, by just collecting the right data and providing some information to your stakeholders that allows them to make decisions with that data. So that's what I'd encourage you to do. Don't lose sight of what you can do with predictive and prescriptive analytics, but start with descriptive and build your way up. This is a hierarchy, and data maturity is a process. You have to collect the data. You have to clean the data. You have to leverage you have to do all of that before you can leverage the data. And this is a process. It's very hard to just wake up in a data immature organization and all of a sudden decide you're going to start using machine learning and AI. Start with descriptive analytics, start with the lowest level, start with the value to your stakeholders, and you'll get to the other things very quickly. So that's what I did at a law firm, starting with the automation, then building on that with user-friendly dashboards that generate value for clients, integrating with clients' business systems, feeding our data directly into their platform, optimizing negotiation strategies, just descriptive analytics, saying what have we negotiated into our other contracts and how might that inform what we negotiate going forward. You can ultimately turn that into a predictive model, but you can get a lot of value initially just from the descriptive analytics based on a small data set that you're collecting through automation. And then eventually it does set you up for AI-assisted drafting and review, so that rather than having to rely on hundreds or thousands of hours from expensive attorneys, you already have a lot of the data that you need in a structured format to be able to feed into a predictive model and expedite your data journey. So that's where I'll leave you, is these keys to implementing innovation. You got to do it one bite at a time, one step at a time, starting with the utility to your stakeholders and figuring out how to create a business case that gets your organization return on its investment, starting small, one step at a time, and then building up innovation upon innovation upon innovation consistently, and having a plan for how you're going to do that and how you're going to get ROI every step of the way. So thank you.